As I mentioned, good morning, and our topic today is unpacking the secret to national kapara. The truth of the matter is, I gave it away in the title. And they should all make or be made into one binding or into one unit. And that really is the secret to achieving national kapara. What I would like to do is to go back to some of the sources and to discern exactly how that comes about, where we see, I should say, that really is the secret to our national kapara. The bottom line is like this. We have a statement in the Zohar that tells us something that I would imagine we all have heard before in some fashion or another, that when the Torah refers to what we call Yom Kippur, the Torah refers to it in the plural, Yom Kippurim, a play on words, Kippurim, which means, of course, that Yom Kippur is like Purim. Come on. The truth of the matter is, if we think about it, they're diametric opposites. On one hand, we have Purim, that is a day of revelry and feasting. We have Yom Kippur, which is a day of solemnity and not feasting, but fasting. Like that one, I came up with that one this morning. It should have been on the sheet, but I first came up with that, feasting versus fasting. No smiles, I'll move on. That's okay. Don't laugh at my jokes or my not so clever titles, whatever it may be. That's perfectly fine with me. They really are complete opposites. Here's another example. In the Megillah, the only text of Purim itself, we don't recite Hallel, the only actual text of Purim itself, beyond Al Hamisim, there is no mention, not one of God's names, not one mention of God's name. So he's obviously there somewhere in the background, but he's only playing a background role. He's not directly involved in the story, and if he is, then it's played back anyway in the way that it was canonized in our Tanakh. On Yom Kippur, we're standing there and we're shouting, as we did this morning, if we recited Slichos, Hashem, Hashem, so many different names and attributes of HaKadosh Baruch Hu throughout the entire day. They really are diametrically opposed. So what could Chazal possibly have meant when they said, not Chazal, but in the Zohar, Yom Kippurim, Kippurim? In what way? How is that possible to even fathom? And I think in order for us to be able to do that, to understand it, to fathom it, to understand it, to comprehend it, we really need to go back to the story of Purim. Or putting it another way, there is no story of Yom Kippur to go back to except what's recorded in the Torah and a few isolated incidents of Tanakh of specific Yom Kippurims that took place. But with Yom Kippur, we know what the Torah tells us. It tells us about the ritual of yore, as opposed to the ritual of today, and hopefully the ritual of Im Yirtzeh Hashem, if one believes that way, once again in the near future. But beyond that, that's all we have for Yom Kippur. We don't have a story, but we do when it comes to Purim. So I thought if we take a look back at the story of Purim, then maybe we can understand what was meant by that statement in the Zohar, that Yom Kippurim, Kippurim, because they really are one and the same. So we'll see how. We're good so far? Please understand that I do not consider myself a lecturer. Oh, I do like lecturing, and I do a lot of it. But this is not intended to be a lecture. And any day in the classroom that I lecture, or putting it another way, any day in the classroom that I have spent more than, I think, 30% of being the focus of attention, I feel like I failed that particular 40-minute class period. I'm not here for them, for me. I'm here for the students. I'm here to guide them. We're in this together. Oh, cool, that's another pun. That really was no pun intended, because that's the theme of this shiur today, sorry. We really are, as a group in this room, we're in this together. And as such, let us be as participatory as possible as you would like. Feel free to interrupt. Feel free to throw tomatoes. Feel free to ask questions, to provide your own insights, whatever you like, okay? So let's take a step back. There is a fascinating recording in the Gemara of two separate stories. By the way, do we feel that maybe having the door open will provide us with more circulation and cooler? Okay. So if either you may feel free to open the door, or let's do this. We'll open it. If it gets too noisy in the hallway, I was one of those, unfortunately, that was schmoozing outside the hallway towards the end of Rabbi Goldman's shiur, and I hate that. And so I stopped myself saying, that's not fair to him, and hopefully nobody will repeat my behavior to be unfair to us. So if it gets too noisy, just feel free to get up and to close the door, and it may or may not have an effect anyway. All right. There's a fascinating story in the Gemara. that tells us that Esther was not only I suppose, a feminist of her day, but she was very, very adamant. She was very insistent, and this was a woman who made sure to get what she wanted. By what God am I glad I wasn't married to that woman. She made sure to get what she wanted, and she didn't back down until whenever she insisted upon anything, or at least in two separate stories that we have in the Gemara, the answer, even by the greatest of the Chachamim, by the Anshe Knesset HaGedola, was yes, you can have your wish. Let's take a look at these two stories. They're both found in Meseches Megillah, and it's source 1. And the Gemara tells us as follows. Amar Rav Shemuel bar Yehuda. He said as follows. Shalcha lahem Esther lachachamim. Esther sent the following message to the Chachamim. Now, keep in mind that in those days, of course, to send a message wasn't as simple as it is today. Kiv'uni lidoros. Establish me for all future generations. In other words, we just had this incredible story, the one that we read about in the Megillah. I want my story to be established for all future generations as a chad. And she insisted upon it. How do we know that? Because Sholchula, they sent back, no. That, while is laudatory in and of itself, if you look at the larger picture, that's really not a very good idea. Why not? Because they sent back, Kin'a at ma'oreres aleinu levein ha'umos. You should know that. In my adult during the week, I do speak in Svaradit, but when I give a shir, I tend to go back into my yeshiva Ashkenazis. I don't mean to offend anybody, but in general, I would be reading that in Svaradit with a somewhat of an Israeli accent, or so I'm told. In any event, you'll be arousing jealousy between us and the surrounding nations. In other words, they're going to pick up on the fact that we're celebrating in the streets, masquerading as all adults do in Eretz Yisrael on Purim, Frum and non-Frum and Haredi alike. Everybody is celebrating Purim as adults like little kids do here. They're going to pick up on that fact that there's revelry, that there's feasting going on to celebrate this victory over them. And that's not going to bode very well for us. There may even be another war that this celebration will serve as a catalyst for. So, no, we don't think it's a very good idea. Shalcha lahem, she was insistent, as I said. She said back, that problem's already been averted. I thought of that one. But you know what? Kivar Kesuva ani, I'm already recorded al divrei hayomim in the chronicles or the journals l'malchein wadai ufaras, to the kingships of Media and Persia. And that itself is mentioned in the Megillah. In the Megillah, it says that all of this is written down. They have the story. It's there for them to read. It's, to some extent, they're not keeping it a secret, it's a public story. It's on the records. So it's not lashon hara if you talk about it. So this won't really arouse as much jealousy as you feel. That's where the story ends in its recording in the Gemara, which leads one to think that that is what led the Chachamim to feel, okay, Esther, you got a point there, you got your wish. Now, why they gave in at that point is curious, but it's for another time. To me, it's curious because why would that do it? Because there's a difference between something being recorded, right, and then people out there with an all-out celebration. In any event, that's the first story in the Gemara. There's another story in the Gemara. It might be time to close the door, but that's up to you to decide. Shalcha lahem Esther lachachamim. Esther sent to the Chachamim, Kisvuni lidoros. Probably in addition to, or it's a separate version of the same story, not just establish me, but record me for all future generations. In other words, I don't want my story recorded only in, thank you, Rabbi Prince, only in the chronicles of Madai and Paras, only in the chronicles of Media and Persia. In addition to that, I want my story recorded and canonized. I want to be part of Tanakh. And they said, that again, that would be a no. Sholchula, this is based on a Gzeras HaKasuv, or the way that the Psukim allude to it. There's a pasuk in Sefer Mishlei, which at its root, by the way, is most probably on a pshat level, referring to something else entirely, and not just recording of stories regarding Amalek, which of course Purim is. But nevertheless, they sent back to her this following pasuk: Haloka savti lecha, I have recorded for you Shilei Shim. I have recorded for you. I really have to look up the pasuk again. If any of you know this pasuk by heart, please tell me now. I don't recall if the word is actually written as Shali Shim, and that's the actual reading, or it's Shilei Shim. But either way, the play on words is going to be obvious in just a moment, so I apologize for that. Shilei Shim v'lo ribeim. I have recorded for you three, and not four. In other words, The way that Chazal, the Ansei Knesset HaGedola, answered back to Esther was, maybe we agree with you that it's a good idea. It's not clear here either way how they felt. But we can't. We have been granted permission from on high, whatever that means and how they understood that, to record 3 different stories regarding Amalek and not 4. Now, if you think about it, in the Torah itself, there are 2 recordings, right? I skipped a lot of some of the Gemara here. I just went right to the Tamtzit, to the the part that's most important for us. But we have the story as it's recorded in Sefer Shemos, the first war with Amalek that transpired. We have the re-recording of that same story 39 years later in Sefer Devarim that we read just before Purim in Parshas Zachar of what transpired earlier on in their history. And then we have the recording in Sefer Shmuel, the war with Amalek and Shaul, and resulting, of course, in Shaul losing his kingship and ultimately his not being able to deal with all of his failings in life and deciding most probably, but not necessarily, depends how you interpret it, but most probably to end his life because he lost the kingship. He lost the kingship because he was given a very straightforward command to kill all of the people and women and children and animals, Amalek, and he has no problem killing all the men because they're the ones that engaged with us in war originally, and that's story way back in Sefer Shemos. He had a problem with killing the women, he had a problem with killing the animals, and he had a problem with following through in the entire command, and God said, I really made it very clear what my wish is, and you don't have to understand me, and I get that you're sensitive, but you had a requirement to follow through. In any event, I apologize, I digress this a little bit. We already have those 3 recordings. They rethought it, and they said, wait a second. The one in Shemos and the one in Devarim, they're the same story. So we know Esther by now. She's that kid, queen, that came to us about that other thing about establishing for us. Everybody knows about Esther's strengths. Everybody knows that this is a woman who does not back down. So let's just save all of the stuff in the middle. Let's get right to the point. They're one story. Shemos and Devarim. That counts as 1. Shmuel, the war with Shaul, counts as 2. Now we have room for a 3rd. And that's what I have here for you. Kisov Zos, at the end of the day, when Hashem told Moshe, Kisov Zos Zikaron Ba'Sefer, that is in Sefer Shemos, upon the conclusion of the first war, recorded this, even though it's not a these, it's a this in the singular, that's Masha Kasukan, what's recorded here, Uve Mishneh Torah, and in Sefer Devarim. Because it's one story, it's the same war. Zikaron, Masha Kasuv Nevi'im. The word Zikaron as a memory refers to the story with Shaul in the Nevi'im. B'Sefer, Masha Kasuv Megillah. And recorded Kisov Zikaron B'Sefer, that then leaves room for your story, Esther, that of the Megillah, to be included as well. So Esther was very adamant. But why? There were, other instances where our very future, our annihilation, was staring us in the face. And those aren't recorded. Was this really that unique? I don't know. And we do know something, that since then, nothing else has been recorded. Granted, we can't canonize any Nesarim into Tanakh. But at the same time, we don't make such a big deal about other days where our annihilation has been staring us in the face and then make a chag out of it. That has not happened ever since and previous to the story of Esther. Why was she so insistent? Okay? Do you have a question or a point?
Yeah, a different question.
Sure. Any.
How does all of this being insistent and not backing down jive with her reluctance to go down to Ahasuerus originally?
That's a very good question. Originally, we're going to get to that actually, she admitted she was wrong. Not really wrong. Who wants to risk losing their life, right? If I go to him, I could be killed. Not only could I be killed, so on the selfish level, the way I've always understood it, although I've not seen this in the Mafarshim, it might be there, is that once they take me out and then they discover who I am, then that might actually be a catalyst for taking out the rest of the Jews too. So there were several things that were going on here. But she quickly changed her mind when Mordechai said to her, maybe this is why you became queen, right? So you kind of have, I get you're risking your life, but you have to go. So I think it may have been also it gets down to this, I think the personal reaction we all would have had is, I'm not so sure that I really want to go through with this. I think. Okay? Does that work?
And you didn't want to go because it wouldn't have worked?
Either because it wouldn't have worked, and because she was risking her life. Right? And so folks showed davar. What would it have accomplished really in the long run? Probably nothing. That's what she thought, right? Until Mordechai convinced her otherwise. And speaking of that, we're about to get right to that. Not her shying away from the request from Mordechai to go to the king originally, but from when she does acquiesce and decides to go to the king and risk her life, what she adds to the package. So that's what we're going to see now. All right? So let's take a look at the next source. We're going now back to the Megillah itself. Vatomer Esther lo shiva Mordechai. Let me just back up a step. We're going to end each little section here with a question. So the question number one is, why, if I didn't make it clear yet, why did Esther care that much? Source number two. Vatomer Esther lo shiva el Mordechai. When Esther finally gave in to Mordechai's request after this give and take, because at first she said, I am not going to the king, but when he said to her, maybe this is why you have become the queen, she sent back, okay, Mordechai, I'll do this. But now you owe me one, and you've got to do something too. And what is that? It's a story we all know. Lech kanos eskola Yehudim hanintzim b'Shushan. Please go, doesn't say that she said please, I'm assuming she did. Please go gather all of the Jews that are in Shushan, v'tsumu alai, and fast for me. Yom Kippur, fasting. V'al tochlu v'al tishtu shloshes yamim, and don't eat and don't drink for 3 days. Where else, by the way, in our literature, in our liturgy on Purim, do we find this concept of not eating and not drinking? And it's made explicitly clear, this wording is exactly the same, that nobody should eat and nobody should drink on Yom Kippur afternoon in our reading of Sefer Yonah. Right? When Melech Nineveh realizes this is business, whether they took it seriously or whether it was really a threat of their annihilation and he was just scared by that, whatever it may be, he somehow understood the power of everybody coming together, of fasting, and not even taking a drink of water when nobody's looking unless you really need it. Shloshes yomim, for 3 days, laila v'yom, night and day, gam ani v'na'arosai yotzum kain, and I and my maidens, we will also fast. I'm going to go. I'm going to fast, and you're going to fast with me. And only then, uvechein avo el hamelech, only then will I go to the king unsummoned. V'chasher avadati, which might be understood to mean that I'm risking my life that I might be killed. Or it might be understood to mean that if I lose out, then if I lose my life, then, as I mentioned before, that might be an illusion. I think it may be too. We just all might risk losing our lives. But Mordecai, you're right. I gotta go. What was this business of everybody fasting together? It was a simple request. You have to go to the king. Either it's going to work or it's not going to work. If it's going to work, it's going to work. Why does everybody else have to fast? What was she talking about? What was she thinking? It certainly seems like it's a novel idea, and that's question number 2. We're good? Okay. Question number 3. This is now the end of the Megillah Esther itself, of the text. And in the second pasuk that I have here quoted, pasuk Chaf Beis, in the middle of source number 2, we find, I'm skipping to the middle of the pasuk of the last line, something that we're all familiar with, of course, because we enact it every year, and we enjoy it every year, to turn these days into Yemei Mishteh V'Simcha, to days of, as I said before, of revelry, of feasting, of joy. Umishloach manos ish l'rehu, we all know about and fulfill mishloach manos. And we all go about finding a way somehow, I know I do every year, to insult friends who don't receive, but in any event, umatanos le'evyonim, in other words, we make sure to incorporate everybody, because while mishloach manos, as Rabbi Yudin of Fairlawn, where I live, I'm not really involved in Shomrei Torah, his shul anymore, he has some incredible gems, and I know that you can attest to that, some incredible gems, and one of them is give mishloach manos not just to your friends, give it to that person down the block who you think might be Jewish, or that person who's sitting next to you in shul that you haven't spoken to in 10 years, but you don't remember why you're not talking to each other, and either give them mishloach manos. That's really what it's all about. It's all about bringing the people together. Now think about it. This is the only chag that we have any such concept of matanos le'evyonim. The closest that we could think of, really, that I could think of, is Pesach. That's pre-Pesach. But that's to provide for the Seder, to provide for the Arbakos Osyayin, to be matzah, etc. Also, when it comes to this, when it comes to being able to observe the Chag properly, so give the needy beforehand. But on the Chag itself, in addition to the daily mitzvah of tzedakah, the general mitzvah, to actually incorporate this into one of the 4 mitzvahs of Purim, the concept of sending gifts of food to our friends, We find this by no other chag. So the question is the same, and I think by now we all really understand the answer. I gave it away in the title of this year. That's question number 3, I think. Okay, now let's take a look at source number 3. We have a fascinating practical Mishnah. But to me, what's most fascinating about it is the end of this whole litany of observances of the reading of the Megillah prior to its dates. You'll see what I mean in just a moment if you're not familiar with the Mishnah. But the last one that I'll be reading to you, that we'll be seeing together, is an exception that seemingly doesn't make any sense whatsoever. So we have a concept, not only that the Megillah must be read, but we have to go out of our way to make sure that everybody can hear the Megillah. And if there are those who simply are, in those days, the word you're probably looking for, that most resembles what most people experienced, they were illiterate. So it wasn't even just a question of knowing how to read the Megillah like today. Do you know how to read the Megillah? Oh, good. Can you relate for us? They couldn't read, period. Right? Most people were just illiterate. And so you had these villagers who had their market days on Mondays and Thursdays. And so that is how Mondays and Thursdays became, as we may be familiar with from the time of the Talmud, and even prior to that, of course, became, or at least I think, became the days when Batei Din, when courts would sit in these small villages on Monday and Thursday, because those were the market days anyway. Those were the, Those were the market days anyway. Those are the days that people came to town. They're already there. This is a great time for people to settle their differences. We'll establish courts on Mondays and Thursdays. Oh, in addition to that, we'll have public Torah readings on Mondays and Thursdays, because that's when people are there. And that's how the practice came about of reading. If you ever thought about it, why do we read the Torah on Monday and Thursday? What's special from a halachic perspective about Monday and Thursday? And the answer is nothing. It's when people were gathered together anyway. So let's make sure we get as many people together as to read for that. Now, if you simply take that and you translate that into the reading of the Megillah, we have this also general concept of Barov Am Hadras Melech. Yes, you can read the Megillah by yourself. Most people are illiterate, so that really is something that would not be applicable for most people. And B, not only that, there's this idea that the more the merrier. There is something to be said for hearing the Megillah today in shul, in yeshiva, wherever, where there's a larger crowd. Or the Mayanot annual women's Megillah reading, whatever it may be. Go Mayanot. There is something to be said for reading this as a group, and not just reading this by yourself. So what about these villagers that will be busy on the Monday and Thursday, if Purim falls on Monday and Thursday, which the Mishnah refers to as a Yom HaKnisa, day of gathering. Now we know why, because that's when they're gathered together in the marketplaces. There is this notion that they're going to be busy. They're going to be busy preparing foods for people to purchase for their seudah, for their mishteh, for people to purchase for mishloach manos, to purchase for giving to the poor, which is really what Matanos Evyonim really is all about. The best way, according to the Rambam, to give Matanos Evyonim is either to give money for food or to actually give them food. Give them a seudah to eat. And maybe that's also the root of mishloach manos, foods that can be eaten for the seudah. In any event, they're going to be busy with the day itself and for themselves. And they're not going to, they'll be in public, it's true, but they're not going to have time for the reading of the Megillah on that day necessarily. And they certainly won't if it's on any other day of the week. Because if Purim falls on any day of the week besides Monday and Thursday, they'll be just as busy because it's Purim on Tuesday or Wednesday or Friday. So then we're going to do them a favor and let them back up to what's called the Yom HaKnisa, the day of gathering. And they're already in the marketplaces anyway, setting up their booths, right, and competing in their barbecue competitions and what have you, and on the shop. So you know what? We'll let them have the Megillah read for them on that day, on the Monday and Thursday, just like they have with the Beis Din and just like they have the Kriyas HaTorah. We'll let them have the Megillah read for them on that day. So, if Purim falls on any day of the week other than Monday and Thursday, Monday or Thursday, they can back up to the previous Monday or Thursday. Got that? That's the Mishnah. So now think about it, because we don't have to read it in sight anymore. We just went through it and I took far too long. There is this concept that not only, or this halachic, I suppose, principle, that not only is the Megillah read on the Monday and Thursday Yom HaKnisa for the villagers, there's also this notion, of course, that the Megillah must be read by everybody else on the 14th and the 15th. Never later than the 15th, never earlier than the 14th, period. The exception is, of course, these small-town villagers. Okay? Now keep that in mind. Let's assume Purim falls on Shabbos, and this is the last line here. This is problematic. Halachically, it should be problematic. Chol Liyos b'Shabbos. That means if Yudalit falls on Shabbos. In case you're wondering, that doesn't happen. Well, it did. before we had a fixed calendar, Purim fell out on Shabbos. It had just as much a chance of falling out on Shabbos as any other day of the week. So Purim sometimes did fall out on Shabbos. So let's assume when Tesvav, the 15th, falls out on Shabbos and Purim is on Friday, so in Yerushalayim it's really something to behold because it's what's called a Purim Mishlosh, or a 3-day Purim, and they divide it up over the 3 days. Fine, but whatever it is, if Purim were to, and it did in those days, fall out on Shabbos, now we know we don't read the Megillah on Shabbos, we're not going to get into why now, that's for a separate reason, and we're not necessarily referring to the observing of the holiday itself, we're simply talking about the reading of the Megillah component of the Chag, okay? So if that's the case, Kifarim, these small town villages, well, they go back to the Yom HaKetzah, the day of gathering. But there's another word here, and I bolted it for you. Va'ayaros gedolos, and the larger cities, meaning the Teanex and the Fair Lawns, they go back to the previous Yom HaKetzah, to Thursday. What? It makes sense that those from the Krokim, from the villages, go back to Thursday. But if Purim falls on Shabbos, what day should we in Teaneck go back to read the Megillah? Shouldn't be Thursday.
Friday.
Should be Friday. Read the Megillah as close to the date as possible. Absolutely should be Friday. So why in the world are we going back to reading the Megillah on Thursday? The same day that they're reading the Megillah for the villagers. Why? We should read the Megillah. In fact, there are, when the Mishnah goes through the different configurations of all the days of the week, there are occasions when there are 3 different dates on when the Megillah is read, depending on which one of these 3 categories we fit into. Walled cities, like Yerushalayim, like Shushan was, right, which are referred to as mukafim, surrounded by a wall, and larger cities that are unfortified, like the Teanex of the world, and in addition to that, the villages. So there are 3 different dates, depending on the week on which, the day of the week in which Purim falls. There are some years when the Megillah can be read on 3 different dates. It is read on 3 different dates. So why here is only 2? Why back up Yom HaKetzah? That's the next question. I lost track of what number question we're up to. Okay? And then, if you've paid attention to the Megillah in the past, the Megillah is 10 prakim long. It's 10 chapters long, but it's over after chapter 9. They're all long prakim. The story is finished. If the Megillah would have ended there, nobody would have been the wiser. There would have been no need to have anything else recorded. Maybe it makes sense to have what we call Perek Yud, Pasuk Aleph, and Pasuk Beis. It's only the Perek Yud is only 3 psukim long. Maybe that could have been added as somewhat of a postscript. It could have been, but instead of leaving it, let's cut and paste it back to the end of Perek Tes, because that's a summation of everything. That after all this was over, life went back to normal, and in Pasuk Aleph, Achashverosh placed the mass, he placed the tax, and by the way, you should know that everything is recorded. We just mentioned that before, right? At the beginning of our shir this morning, that everything is recorded in the journals of Divei Hayalim of Paras and Madai, of Persia and Media, and that's the end. So, what's Pasuk Gimel for? What do we have a Perek Yud for? Take a look at this Pasuk. It is, if you never thought about it before, I think you will now. It is, to me, so strange. Take a look at it. Ki Mordechai HaYehudi. It ends with Mordechai. Look at the pasuk. Who's not mentioned in this pasuk? Obviously. Who's left out?
Esther.
If we're trying to summarize the whole story here, and let's give credit now to, right? We're rolling the credits. The part of Mordechai played by, and no mention of, what do you mean no mention of Esther? She's the story. Mordechai played less of a role than she did. And it says, Ki Mordechai HaYehudi, Mishneh, the second command to the king, he was Gadol HaYehudim, either that means he was a great Jew or great for the Jews, debate for another time. And look at what I bolded, because the Gemara talks about this. V'ratzui l'rovechav, he was desired by most of his people. The Gemara mentions that he was desired by most and not all of his people. In other words, some people hated his guts. They hated him, and they blamed him for the threat of the Jews being annihilated. Why? We all know the Midrashim, but it's also straightforward in the Megillah itself. Mordechai refused to bow down. Please don't think that halachically there was a problem with bowing down. The Gemara does say that, maybe Haman wore some sort of idol, and maybe this and maybe that. There's nothing wrong with trying to vindicate Mordechai. But halachically, he not only was able to bow down, he had a halachic obligation to bow down. That's clear. All agree on that. He had a halachic obligation to bow down. If the king in the area in which you live, in the land in which you live, says everybody must bow down to Haman, which he did because he's not my number 2 in command, you bow down to him. And please don't tell me he was the only devout Jew around. And he looked around and said, well, he's bowing, and that great Chacham is bowing, and that Rav is bowing, so I should bow too. And he refused to bow down. And because he refused to bow down, at least on the surface level, it's obviously deeper than that, Haman decided, you know what? If I'm going to do this, I'm going to go in whole hog, and I'm not just going to be a jerk. I'm going to be a jerk with a capital J, and not just kill him, but kill all of his people too. And of course, unbeknownst to him, Esther was one of those people, etc. So what's this pasuk here for? I think it's because of the end of the pasuk. Because it's true that he was hated by some. Not everybody loved him. Only most did. But don't forget something. He was Doresh Tov L'Amo. Like Esther, he sought after the good of his people. Like Esther, V'dover Shalom L'Chosaro, he spoke of peace. And it maybe didn't seem so apparent at the time to everybody, but only to most people. Don't ever lose sight of the fact that Mordecai stood for the same exact things that Esther stood for. Okay, maybe I answered that question a little bit too early.
I just want to
Go ahead,
share
please.
a story if you don't mind. I had occasion to speak to somebody who was an Iraqi Jew. He wasn't Orthodox, but we were talking about various religious things. And he said that in the community he grew up in, Purim was not considered a very serious or important holiday for this exact reason, that that the perception in this section of the Iraqi Jewish community that was Mordecai was an idiot and he made trouble and he made a big mistake and it was his fault that the whole thing happened, and it's not something we should really celebrate his behavior.
Oh wow, wow, that's fascinating. Obviously, they still celebrated Purim, but they kept it at bay a little bit. Wow,
right.
That's really, really fascinating. I think in order to provide a deeper answer than simply we're all in this together, we need to go back to what I believe is the paradigm for Esther's behavior. What we're going to see next in source number 5 is a list of linguistic parallels, and I recorded maybe 25% of them. The Megillah and the story of Yosef are replete with linguistic parallels. You get to a point where you say to yourself, this can't be an accident. It's a great thing to do in the classroom to lay, I won't be teaching the Megillah this year because I'm teaching feet, but you lay the 2 texts side by side on the smartboard, on the computer, on their iPads, and what they will be doing, I mean, in addition to going shopping for the new summer shoes, because summer's coming up, in addition to, God forbid, in addition to that, if you compare the 2 texts, it's simply mind-boggling. So it's telling us something. So let's take a look. I have for you the story of Yosef on the right, the story of the Megillah on the left. We find by Paro in the story of Yosef, of that Paro. When Yosef interpreted the dreams of Paro, right, about the upcoming famine and how to prepare for the famine, well, the years of plenty, then the famine. The Torah records, Vayitav hadavar be'enei Pharaoh. It was good in his eyes. He thought it was a good idea. Take a look just across the street. Vayitav hadavar be'enei hamelech. It's an exact quote. Back to the story of Yosef. Vayimtza Yosef chen be'einav. Yosef found favor. This is a reference to Potiphar or to Potiphar in any of the movies you might watch in English. Vatihi Esther, same words, no say chen. Esther found favor in the eyes of all those who saw her. We find by the story of Yosef Vayitzof Paro. We find by the story of the Megillah Vayitzof Hamelech Ma'od. So his title wasn't Paro. His title was, what was his title? I don't even know. I have no idea what title was of kings in Persia at the time. I should have looked that up. I should know. But in any event, the king got angry. The list goes on and on and on, and because the time is running away from us, we're not going to go through all of them, but I do want to go to the one that's to start again, the 4th from the end. If you take a look there, it's the same story, but the language is exactly the same also. Vayasar paro es tabato me'al yodo. In the story of Yosef, in order to appoint Yosef as the second in command, just like Achashverosh appoints Haman as second in command, and then later when he v'na'afochu, right, and he changes his mind and says, okay, Haman, you're done. Now it's Mordecai's turn to be second in command. The stories are the same, and the language is exactly the same. Vayosar paro es tabato. Paro removed his signet ring, from his own hand, and he placed it on the hand of Yosef. In the story of Purim, Vayasar hamelech es tabato, same language, he removed his signet ring and he gave it to Haman. Later we find that exact same quote again, he gives it to, except that he removes it from Haman, from the hand of Haman, and he places it upon the finger of Mordechai. And there are several others. The third to the last one, Vayis Apak, which literally means he held back. So without getting into the context now, again, because we're running late, and I apologize for that, these are the only two occasions in the entire Tanakh where you find that exact form of that word. The only two, Vayis Apak. Okay? He wrote him on the Merkavas Hamish in the vice president's chariot. And the list, as I said, goes on. And this can't be an accident. There has to be some sort of reasoning that went on here in recording the story of the Megillah, of writing it in the way that it was written. Now keep something else in mind. Who are we told, actually wrote the story of the Megillah? Mordechai, say it again?
Mordechai.
Yeah, Mordechai. And the Anshe Knesset HaGedolah, one of the understandings, it may be Rashi, but I'm not 100% certain on this, is when we say that they wrote it too, what they really did was that they redacted it, or they canonized it. They didn't write it. The authors were Mordechai and probably Esther too. So they knew what they were doing. It's as if they couldn't look on their smartboard. They opened up the text, and they wrote the story of Purim based on that. Why? Because it's the same exact story. The story is one and the same. One is on a micro level, on a familial or family level, and the other one is on a national level. Think about it. Yosef's brothers hated him. Eventually he comes to realize, yeah, I was a brat, I was probably a fault too. I went around bragging about how great I am and I'm greater than my brothers, etc. This was a family that was completely torn asunder. Now, if you look at the different Mefarshim in exactly what in the world was Yosef thinking when he caused trouble for his brothers all these years later, what was he doing with the whole story with the Gavia, with the goblet, and with the money in the sacks, and with the taking Shimon of a prisoner? If you go through the text there, which we cannot do today, of course, because it's for a different time, Yosef is dropping hints to his brothers all along that I'm Yosef. One after the other after the other. Hi guys, hello. He doesn't want to tell them yet. He's not ready to tell them. He feels, according to some of the commentaries, that he cannot tell his brothers who he is. As soon as he does, they're going to go home, whether he tells them to or not. They're going to go home and say, Dad, guess what? Oh, Yosef Chai! Your son Yosef, our brother, he's alive! Can't do that yet. Are you kidding me? This is probably the most, well, no, it's not actually. Abraham and as I think this through, Abraham together with Ishmael and Yitzchak was just as fragmented. Okay? But this is certainly an example of a completely and totally broken and fragmented family. The brothers hated each other. They may be not feeling so positive towards their father. Most of them certainly don't have positive feelings towards Rachel, towards Yosef's mother, who passed away, of course, at an early age when she gave birth to Binyamin. Binyamin's not even in the picture. There's a lot of infighting going on here. And the sibling rivalry is virtually, if not completely, unparalleled. And according to some of the Mefarshim, Yosef has a lot of missions in mind that he understands. God sent me here on a mission. To quote a certain movie, which I love, which of course I don't admit that I ever watched, but I will still watch it again to this day next time it's on TV. We're on a mission from God. What movie was that from? Anybody? You know, right?
Sounds familiar.
The Blues Brothers. Okay. We're on a mission from God. And that's why they perform their concerts to raise money for that church. He was on a mission from God, and he knew it. Because that's why he had those dreams. Otherwise, why would God have sent him those dreams? And one of those missions was to bring the family back together again. I have a responsibility to bring my family back together again. And only once I accomplish that, only once I can configure and come up with all of these different ways to bring the family together again, then I can tell my brothers, guess what, guys? Ta-da! He takes off his suit jacket and says, it's me! And the first thing he said was, it's hot in here, please excuse me, take off my suit. It's me! It's me, guys, come on! Now go home and tell Dad to come live here. And now hopefully we can be one happy family living, living happily ever after, going forward. And that's really, if you think about it, what Yosef did. One of the things that he actually did in his very strange, bizarre, perhaps even some would think inexcusable behavior, is to make sure that the brothers will get along with each other and keep any anger or jealousy they have at bay and not even make any forward mention of it when they're sitting together with him, right? And he seats them in age order. That's one of the hints, by the way, and they're going, huh? How did he know How did he know that Shimon was number 2 and that Binyamin was Binyamin they knew. But that, let's say, I don't know, that Yisachar was number whatever Yisachar is, I was counting in my head. How did he know that? But aside from that, he gives Binyamin 5 times as much food. Imagine, you got a 1 scoop. It sounds like a news story that that was in the news about a year ago maybe, where a certain individual was served dessert. And he had 2 scoops of ice cream, and everybody else in the room was only served 1 scoop of ice cream. Without getting into that, imagine you're Binyamin and you have this 5 scoop serving of ice cream, a 5 scoop sundae, and everybody else, your brothers, only get a 1 scoop sundae, and they didn't say a word. But then, when Yosef sends them home, he tells them, "Al tir gezu badarech." Don't go ahead and get angry along the way, because it was easy for them to control their anger when they're sitting right in front of the second in command, and they may have even figured out by then it's Yosef. Who knows? But when he's not with them, how do I know they're going to behave when I'm not there? And he makes sure that they do behave. And then when he goes ahead and he takes Binyamin with that whole trick, he wants to see how they're going to react. Are they going to ditch him like they ditched his older brother, me? Or are they going to step up to the plate? And Yehuda does. Eventually, what emerges is that this is now a family that realizes that we are one family. We're no longer just individual units. We are one much larger unit. So that was the story of a family. Now let's get back to the story of Purim. It's the same exact story. Klal Yisrael, there's a lot of literature about this, were completely and totally torn asunder. They weren't getting along with each other. We don't today either. How much has really changed? Many people had very little to do with one another. There was a lot of fighting, a lot of divisiveness. And Esther understood. You know what the key is to our survival? The key to our survival, the key to seeing ourselves through this disaster, this tragedy that's staring us in the face, our complete total annihilation, is to make sure that at very least on the surface level, we all respect each other. We have to be in this together. And so if we flip back very quickly to going back in the same order that we quoted the sources, rather than working chiastically or backwards, we'll just go back through from the beginning again. Why was Esther so insistent on the recording of her story? And why was she so insistent on making listen to a chag? It's not just because of the celebration, which is, of course, important. It's so much more than that. It's because of what's behind it. It's because of the fact that she understood that we have to be in this together, and that is the message of the story. That's how we emerge victorious. And we've got to get that out there, and we've got to make this at the very least an annual event one day of the year. And hopefully that message will stay with us the rest of the days of the year. Excuse me. Why did she tell everybody that they have to fast? Well, now we understand why. It's all about being in this together. I am the only one physically risking my life. That is true. But you got to be a part of this. Because if you're not a part of this, it doesn't make a difference. Rabbi Avi Herzog said at the outside of the shir, I told you a lie. I believe it is an absolute lie, and I said on purpose. Either her going to the king is going to work or it's not going to work. What difference does it make? It's not true. It's just not true. If she goes and she's only representing her people, but they don't even realize what's going on, they don't even know she's going, we don't stand a chance of succeeding. God will say, to heck with my people, they're not even paying attention to Esther. Get the word out that I'm going, fast, be in there with me, and if God sees that we're all in this together, then maybe I have a chance of succeeding. Maybe then the Caparo will look down from on high, just like he does in Yom Kippur, and say, you know what? They don't have a chance of achieving national atonement on Yom Kippur, but at least national salvation on Purim. Yeah?
But it's interesting that she says, Tzumu alai, and not Tzumu aleichem, or aleinu. Right? She doesn't say that they should realize that we're all in this together.
Interesting. I never thought about that before. Interesting. Because, of course, it does mean for me, right?
Yeah, but
interesting
she
point.
really wants them to understand that we're all in this together. I'm going for you. Right?
Do you have an answer?
No.
No, sorry. It's a great question. It's certainly a great question. And I would imagine if we think about it long enough, we'll come up with answers too. Unfortunately, we would run over time if we did. Okay, but it's a great question. When Purim falls on Shabbos, why do those who live in the Tenex of the world go back to have the Megillah read for them on the Yom HaKanisa too, and they should be reading it on Friday, when halachically you would think they should be reading it on Friday, not go back 2 days? Well, now we know why. Because if they're already not going to read it on the day that they should, which is Shabbos, then at least go back to a day when other people are reading too. At least let's be in this together. Let's make one binding. Let's make one micro unit out of all of us. That's the answer to that question. The linguistic parallels, everything we went through already. And I think with this, we can pretty much come close to concluding our shir, and we can return to where we began. I really do think that the story of Purim, and I think now it emerges, is the paradigm for achieving national kapara. We all know what it means. We all understand what steps we must take to achieve, think about it, individual kapara, on an individual level. How do we achieve atonement? Well, we're told what to do. It's laid out for us very clearly in the Rambam and other sources. If it's a mitzvah bein adam l'chavero, if we're talking about interpersonal relationships, then we must do our utmost to repair the interpersonal relationships. That's what all the different steps of Shuv are all about. Bottom line, we must do our best to repair those relationships that we have. That's the story of Yosef and his brothers. That's Yehuda sticking up for Binyamin and saying, "You kidding me, Yosef? Are you out of your mind? He's going to be that kid." He's not a kid anymore. He has more children than Yehuda does. He has 10 children by that point. You're going to go ahead and take him as a slave? No way! I'm going to be a slave instead. It's all about sticking up for each other. It's all about repairing our interpersonal or our familial relationships. When it comes to mitzvahs bein adam l'makom, we know that too. It's very simple. God, I'm going to try harder. Please see to it that you forgive me. Rachem alai. We say Kel Melech Yosef al Kisei Rachamim when we introduce the Shlosh Esrei Midos, the 13 attributes that we say in Slichos and several times throughout the course of Yom Kippur, throughout the day that we lose count. And if we really think about what we're saying, God, I want you to please act today as if you're sitting on Kisei Rachamim. Please don't give me, or even don't give us Klal Yisrael, any of this Yom Hadin stuff. I really don't need to hear that my end is coming, because I deserve to die, and I know it. Because if you go ahead and follow through in the punishments you say in the Torah that I deserve, then when Herzog goes ahead and turns on his lights, because nobody's looking to make sure to pick the right tie to go with his suit, and I'm being recorded, so I didn't actually do that, I'm just giving that as an example. Anyway, the bottom line is, why am I here? Does anybody really deserve to be alive if God were to follow through in the punishments? So God, take that side of you, the one that lets us live another day when you promised you'd kill us all, and look at us that way. So the story of Purim is very similar to the story of Yosef. We've got down pat how to achieve individual kapara, atonement, whether we're talking about on mitzvahs bein adam l'chavero or mitzvahs bein adam l'makom. But what about on a national level? So we look to the story of Yosef, and we take that micro story, and we simply magnify it, and we turn it into a macro story. That is the story of the holiday of Purim. And Esther and Mordechai understood that, and they understood that just as Yosef went out of his way to see to it that he had a responsibility to bring the family back together again, but he couldn't do so until they were willing to, at very least, live with one another and respect one another. And of course, there would be some hatred that's everlasting, that deep down inside. We can't avoid that. We're human. We all know that's how it works. We all know that if we ever are able to achieve forgive and forget to somebody else for something, we can forgive. You can't forget. You probably shouldn't forget. On some level, it's good to remember for a whole host of reasons. It's actually positive to remember, but this is not a shiur in psychology. But in any event, Yosef then brought the family together only once he realized that they had already brought themselves together. Now, I can physically join them and say to them, I am Yosef, and get Abba to come down here and join us. And Esther and Mordechai realized that if that's our story, but now it's on a micro level, on a macro level, on a national level, then that's exactly what I have to do too. I must go out of my way, not just to risk my life and go to the king, but to do everything in my power to bring a fragmented, divisive people back together as one. If I can do my part in achieving that, then maybe we have a chance of beating this guy Hummin. Maybe we have a chance of winning over all of those that are there to seek our demise. maybe, just maybe, we stand a chance, this is not just my throat, but it's also emotion talking right now, so please forgive me. But maybe we just stand a chance of those Hammans of our day, which manifest themselves yet again this morning in this brutal attack on in Efrat. This morning you'll get another stabbing. That is the key to our survival, and that I really do believe is the key, and it's the only chance we have at achieving national Caparo. So if we could all just walk out of this room this morning, and all of us could just take with us, all thousands of us that showed up to hear this here, and the other Shorten, to do our part, and to turning Yom Kippur into what Yom Kippur really should be, to each of us think of our own ways that we can, to see to it that we as Klal Yisrael are exactly that we are one unit, and that we do more than just pay mere lip service to the words that we recite that simply go by so quickly in passing. And I think it's only reference to national unity in the entire liturgy of Yom Kippur, I think. And that's right in the middle of the Shmona Esrei. V'yasu chulam agudat achas, let them all make one binding lasos v'tzalkal b'leivav shalem. We don't even give it a second thought, but we need to. And if we do, then we can really understand, perhaps, what the Zohar means when it tells us that Yom Kippurim Purim. You want to know the secret to national kapara? It's the same as the secret to national salvation. Spiritual salvation and physical salvation go hand in hand. All we need to do is to look at the story of Purim to understand and hopefully emerge in a way that HaKadosh Baruch Hu sees that we really do get this message that Purim and Yom Kippurim are really one and the same. So I just want to take the opportunity to wish all of us in the Yeshivish vernacular, the European vernacular, a good event to your Gamar Chatzima Tova. May all of Klal Yisrael, may the entire world be blessed with a year of Shalom. Does anybody have any questions or follow-up thoughts or comments or? Okay. Good. Yes.
As you're talking,